Hey everyone, welcome back. We've covered our 2 Incarnon weapons for the week and we're now waiting on weekly reset for the new ones. Personally, I know I've been interested in trying out the Boltor Prime Incarnon. I'll be streaming later before reset so we can figure out what all the new Incarnons for week 3 do together. Today's melee is Syam. I've heard a lot of people call this weapon garbage in that it's just a worse Nikana Prime with a useless gimmick. The weeb stick, if you will. The thing is, it can do a lot more than you think. Every single weapon I've showcased since Duviri launched has generally been with 0 buffs or a single helmet that can be used on any frame. Frame-specific synergies are mentioned where appropriate. This has been to ensure an equal, fair representation of each weapon's potential. The Syam is, in fact, significantly weaker than the Nikana Prime as a normal weapon. It has almost 1.5 times the base damage and noticeably higher status, but only 40% slash weight instead of 90. Is it still slash viable? Yes, but it does not compare to Nikana as a slash melee. How about its gimmick, the Angetsu heavy attack? It's actually stupid strong. There are a few important things to note about this wave mechanic. It fully replaces the standard Nikana heavy attack that force procs slash. This gimmick does not force proc slash, in fact it force procs impact. If you want to use the standard Nikana heavy for slash, this can be done by heavy attacking while sliding. This gimmick has 500 base damage on the first swing and 1500 on the second swing of the heavy. First swing is a roughly 8 meter wide horizontal projectile, whereas the second swing is a vertical wave. The horizontal wave travels noticeably faster over literally any obstacle, whereas the vertical wave can headshot. It is rather difficult though with either wave due to the fixed heights above the ground. You cannot aim these waves into the air. It takes full scaling from melee mods, and this includes proper scaling from condition overload, is multiplied by your combo and consumes it, and the most important part to understand is this is 2 times to 6 times higher base damage than your typical melee swing. The wave also has 1.0 follow through and loses 0 damage over the distance it travels. It has 0 punch through. As I said, it works more like Nerimon's lifted status wave, and anything that isn't a literal wall, yes, even this beam onto the staircase, it will rise over and climb it. This means you can easily hit enemies behind objects or on higher elevations. However, it can only move over areas wide enough to accommodate the projectile. Narrow hallways, doorways, etc. can prevent it from traveling properly. So how does it interact with abilities? It ignores Meg's bubble. This also means it ignores Xata's whisper. It also cannot be controlled properly by Avara's Navigator. For the first few seconds, you can direct it around and somewhat control the camera. After that, the projectile forcefully moves in the original direction and you lose the ability to control anything besides the camera. Zephyr's tornadoes are also only hit once by this projectile, but there is another issue. It inflicts so much damage on single hits that it frequently breaks them and causes them to stop transferring weapon damage until you recast. Yup, Syam waves are actually strong. Who would have thought? The other thing to understand is that the waves are 100% heat. If you were trying to slash with them, maybe that's why people considered it weak. They saw no slash procs and therefore it must suck. The thing is, it inherits all status and crit scaling from the base weapon stats. The only thing that changes are that 500 base damage on first swing and 1500 on the second. Damage this high at 100% heat and high status is a textbook candidate for gas setups and heat inherit setups. But what if you're adamant on using this as a normal melee? Let's look at that first. Today's stance choices are either Blind Justice or Decisive Judgement. Blind Justice uses a reverse grip Nikana and is actually designed to reflect that on hitboxes, while it has much higher DPS than Decisive Judgement. Actually being some of the highest of any stance in the game, it is almost entirely frontal, lacking any significant horizontal sweeps, and it has a straight up 1 to 2 meters less range than Decisive Judgement swings. It builds combo quicker than other Nikana stances and is very good at sustained DPS for cutting down elite enemies. Decisive Judgement used to have significantly more force slash procs than Blind Justice. However, DE removed the 300% force slash proc on the second hit of the neutral combo about 2 years ago, significantly reducing its potential for non-slash weighted melees like Syam in comparison to Blind Justice. On the other hand, Decisive Judgement still has significantly wider horizontal sweeps and thus ease of use against crowds. It also has an overhead chop that does massive damage on headshots if you can land it. Keep in mind, Nikanas have 0.7 follow through, meaning they are moderately effective at hitting 5 enemies in a single swing, retaining 16.8% damage for bleed scaling. Syam is still able to take advantage of Decisive Judgement's wider swings this way. For crown clearing, I would actually recommend Decisive Judgement at base steel path content. For endurance, Demolyst, or dedicated Acolyte killing, I would recommend using Blind Justice. The The biggest problem with Syam is its 40% slash weight. At base steel path, slash frequency is more important than sustained DPS from slash. Enemies will die to 1 or 2 slash procs, and therefore it is more important to actually proc slash than trying to pump up the damage of a single slash proc. The exception to this are beams. Carnis Mandible is used to fix slash weight of melees with base 40 to 60% slash. Below this ratio, Carnis cannot increase slash weight enough to matter compared to building other stats. And above 60%, the weapon doesn't need Carnis as it already has enough slash to be a proper slash melee. Carnis occupies the flex slot normally used by Gladiator Might or spring-loaded blade in a traditional slash weapon. This means the base damage advantage versus NikanaP of 270 vs 198 is almost entirely nullified by not slotting Gladiator Might. Just so that you can fix the slash weight, Carnis increases slash weight from 40 to 55.9%. We still need Blood Rush and Organ Shatter alongside Weeping Wounds to scale up crits and proc slash at 12x combo. Syam reaches 118.8% crit chance and 204% status. Reach is extremely important for Nikanas to feel better due to their concentrated frontal hitboxes. Prime Smite Grenier double dips for 2.4 times more bleeds. If you don't want to use this, Gladiator Might would fill this slot 100%. NikanaP is still superior to the 90% slash weight, inflicting double the slash proc of Syam's 40% slash even just out of the box. The crit advantage just further tips the scales in NikanaP's favor. It is not even close. I do not calculate this margin, but NikanaP is probably 20 to 30% higher sustained DPS than Syam on normal attack spam. How about on heavy attacks? Keep in mind, you need to slide heavy on Syam to actually use the traditional force proc slash Nikana heavy. Luckily, Syam loses no slots on a heavy build and can be modded the exact same way as NikanaP. What is important is that Weeping Wounds is still worth slotting on a 12x heavy build. This is because NikanaP's 90% slash weight and status scale so high that you actually get more slash procs at 12x combo heavy than the force proc the weapon gives itself. Even Syam nearly matches the force proc slash from natural proc scaling due to Weeping Wounds. To maintain crit consistency, the comparison I'm about to show you has been done with Arcane Avenger active. This pushes both Syam and Nikana to roughly 200% crit chance for mainly oranges on heavy attacks. On 12x heavy builds, the crit chance gap becomes apparent. A single slash proc from Syam heavy is roughly equal to NikanaP slash proc, except Nikana procs far more slash than Syam does on a heavy. This results in NikanaP having 45% higher bleed DPS than Syam, and even bigger of a gap than on light attack spam. You might consider dropping Weeping Wounds on Syam due to the natural slash procs only contributing 0.734 procs per heavy attack compared to the force proc itself. Even replacing this with the best alternative, Sacrificial Steel, actually still results in a 6% DPS loss compared to Weeping, and does not help Syam's case. On the other hand, Syam is just barely better than Dragon Nikana on a heavy attack build, and technically puts it in second place as a heavy attack Nikana. Now let's talk about where Syam actually shines, the gimmick usage. As I said, it cannot proc slash since it is 100% heat. The forced impact proc is useless. There are several things we can do. Use the heat as a free element for modding combinations, use the heat for heat inherit setups and specific enemies very hard, or ignoring the element, and taking advantage of the absurd high base damage for raw damage scaling. If you want to use Voruna on any build today for 90% heavy efficiency on her third passive, you can replace Corrupt Charge or Reflex Coil on builds today with Weeping Wounds. And if using melee prowess on gas DPS, you can instead run Blood Rush as well. So let's try gas first. This is a 2x combo gas wave build. Yes, it's only 2x combo with Corrupt Charge. Why does this perform so well? Because gas has quadratic scaling on group targets. Any enemy prompt with gas can tag another enemy. Unfortunately, gas only has 0.6 spherical AoE per stack applied. Therefore, you realistically only reach 2 stacks of gas here from the horizontal and vertical waves. The quadratic scaling is not fully represented due to lack of overlap. Alternatively, any frame that can use grouping tools innately with Sickening Pulse would instantly max out to 10 stacks of gas, creating overlapping 6-meter AoE clouds everywhere. But that's not what I'm focusing on today. It isn't needed on Syam gas builds to function. Gas does not scale dot damage with elemental scaling. Therefore, the innate heat lets me save a mod slot by only needing a single toxin mod. You will want to prime enemies for viral scaling, as well as a bunch of extra procs, since the wave does get full scaling from condition overload. Prime Smite is extremely important to double dip gas procs for 2.4 times more damage. Amalgamorgan Shatter makes it easier and cuts down on the heavy 1-up, and we use Corrupt Charge instead of Weeping Wounds since we only need and want 2 times combo. This also means we replace Blood Rush with Sacrificial, which still provides plus 440% crit chance like Blood Rush due to applying twice on heavy attacks. Melee Prowess is the best mod I can slot to improve our status chance since our most important goal is to apply gas to as many enemies as possible per swing. On this build, Melee Prowess is actually 56% total damage increase to gas proc DPS by boosting our status. I did not take Proton Snap because this build already requires some setup per nuke and would add unnecessary complexity to the rotation. Grouping tools are required for use with the 2 times gas build. And Snare is most highly recommended due to ragdoll hitboxes interfering with gas cloud collision calculations for applying damage. You basically cast Ensnare, shoot a primer, and then heavy attack twice with Syam. Everything dies. For Acolytes, they resist the damage scaling of Syam's projectile twofold, therefore using a slide heavy to inflict massive raw damage to them while also slapping them with a heavy proc slash. Bringing around a pocket Latron can be pretty handy to strip their armor off if needed for even raw damage. The reason this build works is due to Syam's sheer raw damage on the waves overcoming gas lack of elemental scaling and flesh resistance. The fourth build today is extremely simple. It is a full strip viral build. This setup ignores the innate heat typing and instead tries to take advantage of the massive innate damage that projectiles have. We also want to skip condition overload since unlike the Ensnare setup, viral Syam is all about spamming the waves everywhere as much as possible. I would strongly recommend using Arcane Fury with this build. It is extremely annoying to require priming otherwise. You can save that for problematic enemies like Xmi or Acolytes. There are only 3 mod changes compared to the gas build. Prime Pressure Point instead of Condition Overload, running Prime Fever Strike instead of 60% Toxin mod since we only want raw damage, not status, and skipping Melee Prowess for North Wind so that we can make viral damage typing. This build absolutely requires armor strip since the raw damage of Syam waves themselves alone are not strong enough to one-shot base steel path enemies consistently with corrosive. This is due to while Syam having extreme damage on the wave, you can only swing it so quickly compared to spamming hack and slash. Pillage is much preferred over Terrify because it has massive AoE unlike Therostrike, and because Syam's projectile travels in a straight line with no actual AoE. Using a non-crowd controlling armor strip helmet allows enemies to push you in a straight line, letting Syam cut them down with ease. This avoids you having to chase enemies down. High strength also benefits frames that have innate damage buffs. The fifth build today is exclusive for Demolyst Killing. It is a heat inherent build, and if you want to know how this works, it's actually kind of simple. Heat is a unique element. It does not care about your heat percent mods except on whatever inflicted the very first heat proc on the enemy. This heat percent carries forward for all weapons and abilities used on that enemy afterwards, until either they die or all heat procs expire. Applying heat procs refreshes every single stack on that enemy to a 6 seconds duration at base, meaning heat damage scales infinitely on procs. Its only obstacle is armor since it does not ignore it like Slash can. Therefore, you can apply the first heat proc with a weapon modded with as high heat percent as possible, since this heat percent will get passed on to Syam. I'm using a generic heat inherent Epitaph to crowd control enemies with viral and cold procs, but also priming the Demolyst specifically with 225% heat mods. If you have it, use secondary Cucumber for tons of more unique status effects for condition overload on Syam. Otherwise, use Dexterity for more combo duration. Recall that dots double dip Banes. Heat is also unique in that one of the dips comes from the weapon that inflicted the first heat proc, whereas the second dip comes from whatever is used afterwards. Therefore, we have to mod primed Banes onto our Epitaph as well. Simply put, stack heat percent mods and stack Bane percent on your heat inherent primer. On our actual DPS weapon, we mod everything like normal, including the second Bane. But we can skip modding heat. We only need enough heat present to proc so we can keep applying more stacks. Since any heat stack on Syam applies, we'll use the heat percent modded onto our Epitaph instead. Normally, a single heat mod would be enough, but since Syam is pure heat on its wave, we actually don't need to mod heat on at all. This lets us save a mod slot for quickening, making it much easier to build combo to 12x. Or you could say Gladiator Might for crit damage is the flex. I don't know, but it does open up a slot. We mod fully into base damage, crits, status scaling. Reflex Coil allows us to retain 60% of our combo after we do the double wave swing. Voruna can run Sacrificial Steel instead here. against a full stripped, primed Demolyst that inflicts roughly 1 to 1.5 million heat damage, and applies a 2 to 3 million burn after the second swing that takes once per second. This build scales infinitely to level 9000, and very often you will outright kill the Demolyst at base steel path with a vertical swing, but for the burn can actually even land the 2 million plus burn tick. For armor stripping today, you have several options. Notice how I use 0 abilities to showcase the Demolyst setup. If you have access to Latron and Carnon, wonderful. While not required, it gives you the option to strip armor with a gun, letting you bring either a more damage helmet, such as Roar or Eclipse, or survivability helmets, like Muzzle Flash, Resonator, Radio Blind, Breach Surge, etc. This is how you build an armor strip Latron and Carnon. Keep in mind you absolutely have to have the Evolution 4 Flensing Spikes perk selected for Puncture procs to strip 20% armor off per stack. We're focusing on maximizing fire rate, multi-shot, and puncture weight. Bring dexterity to add more combo duration to Syam. If you do not have Latron and Carnon, the easiest armor strip option instead is a Thero Strike Subsume. If you want to keep your helmet for crowd control instead, then you can bring Uneru Caustic Stripe Strip. Just keep in mind this means you will not be able to bring Neramon Power Spike for saving melee combo. How to use? Easy. Find a Demolyst, preferably tether it with Magus Lockdown from your operator. Spam your Epitaph edit to stack Cold, Viral, and apply your first heat procs as well as extra procs if you have secondary Cucumber for condition overload. Switch to your Latron and Carnon and spam shots to strip armor off, or cast your armor strip ability, or cast Unera Caustic Strike, whatever one you're bringing. Then hold F, or your melee button, to force pull out Syam and spam 2 heavy attacks to annihilate a Demolyst instantly. Clean, and it should be done from start to finish in about 4 to 5 seconds. For the Acolyte, I would recommend using the Slide Heavy to inflict a massive 12 times combo slash proc. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like, or better yet, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always, as soon as possible, like I've done with the Duviri update. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis, as well as the earliest Duviri content. Don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.